Hey everyone, welcome to another session of A Day in the Life of a BA. I'm James, the President of IIBA Ireland, and I'll be your host today. At IIBA Ireland, our mission is to support professionals by sharing knowledge, common terminology, and practical insights into the work of BAs across different industries. And this series gives you the chance to hear directly from BA professionals about their typical day, like their processes, the tools and techniques they use, the challenges and successes that they encounter in their industry. And each month, we're inviting a BA professional to share their personal journey, highlighting the approaches they take, the technologies they rely on, and real world examples from their work. So, whether you're considering a career in business analysis, already working alongside another business analyst, or simply looking to deepen your understanding of the role, today's session is designed to give you that clarity, confidence, and a shared language for working effectively with BAs. And today I'm delighted to join by Arvind, a business analyst who works in the banking domain. Arvind will be walking us through his own day in the life and sharing practical insights from his experience. Please feel free to turn on your camera if you'd like to interact. And throughout the session, don't hesitate to drop your questions into the Q&A tab or the chat function where we'll address them at the end. So without further ado, Arvind, it's over to you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm actually quite delighted to be doing this because it's giving me an opportunity to think about my time in banking. No, I'm not giving out any prizes for guessing where I come from. I come from India, but I have migrated to Australia about 23 years ago, and this is where I've had most of my work experience, my professional experience. I did work in India for a few years. I even started a business in India for a couple of years, but then I moved to Australia way back in 2003. Worked in quite a lot of places across consulting, banking, and I've worked in banks for both as an employee as well as a consultant. And a lot of my learnings of what I'm going to be sharing today is in both those capacities as an employee and as a consultant. So all the various circles that you see around are the banks that I've majorly worked in. A lot of banks I've worked in Australia, but I've also worked in international banks as well, mostly as a consultant. Having said that, it's not very difficult to be working in a bank in Australia. What I mean to say there is that the majority of the Australian working population at some point has worked in a bank, because banking and mining are the two most successful industries in Australia. So the banking industry is a pretty strong industry, and they're constantly innovating. They're constantly doing something to make the products better, to make customer service better. And so I have done my bit working for different banks at various stages, and I'm just going to pick up a few of the things that I learned and will pass on and try and pass on to you. I hope you like it. So, where am I? Cool. So, if you ask me, sorry, I should have also told you a few other things as well. As you see, I've worked in all these different places, but what I also do is I work in the Australian chapter of IIBA. So I'm one of the board directors for the Australian chapter. My portfolio is my portfolio is corporate engagement, where we actively engage with corporates and try and sell corporate membership for them, and organize events for our corporate members to ensure we give them value for what over and above what we already do as part of the corporate membership. So speaking of that, so what if you ask me, and I've done this a few times, if you ask me what does a business analyst do, and it's a very difficult question to answer, right? But then I would urge you to think about your value not in terms of the artifacts you produce, but in terms of the impact you create. Okay, so keeping that in mind, I've got my own personal 3 C's of a business analyst. And the first thing is that our job is to bring clarity. right? And we usually work in chaos. We usually work in ambiguity, and we thrive. We're supposed to thrive in ambiguity because that is our job to bring clarity on the table. The second thing the second C is we are responsible for collaboration. So we bring the community, not the project community together. We bring the business together, and it's our job to ensure that everyone's being heard. And so it's our job to foster collaboration. And the last but not the least is effective communication, because the secret of a good BA lies in the way they communicate clearly in their documents, and also written communication, verbal communication, non-verbal communication, and even listening are the four different types of communication that IIBA talks about. And it's all about being able to communicate in all those four aspects of communication. So if you ask me what a BA does, that will be my answer, is that someone who brings clarity, someone who fosters collaboration, and someone who effectively communicates, right? So keeping that in mind, we will look at other aspects of what I found useful working in banking, and give you a few stories of what I did in across my experience working in different banks. Right. So the first thing a BA does is, or not a first thing, or one of the important things that a BA does is thinking outside the box, right? And so for most BAs, that box does not even exist. Why? Because we do not come from that box. We always think about what's the best solution for a problem that's been presented to you. So keep about that. I worked in one of the major banks in Australia, one of the top four banks over there. And one of the problems that was presented to me was it was a very strange problem, because they said we do a quarterly report of. I used to work in institutional banking, and what institutional banking means that all your customers have got a minimum of $5 million worth of assets. So all your customers are all the major corporations of Australia, and how we manage their accounts and whatnot. So and so a lot of that relationship between the bank and your corporate customers are maintained by what we call relationship managers. So I'm saying all this in the context of the Australian financial market, so in Ireland, you might have something different. You might call relationships managers something else. But effectively, what those relationship managers do is that they actively foster a good relationship with their customers, and try to customize the bank's products which will suit their needs. Okay, so every time they have a meeting with their clients, they are tweaking something, or they are adding something else, or they're taking something off because they don't need it anymore, and so on and so forth. So what they do after having that conversation is they come back to the office, and then they go into the system and make those changes in the system. Now, what they then do is that there is a quarterly report that gets printed out and given to all these relationship managers for them to double check from their notes to what the system is telling them. As in that report, the system gives you a summary of all the changes that have been done in the last 3 months, and the relationship managers are being asked to check with their notes and see whether the right changes have been made in those last 3 months. So there is one executive assistant who takes the responsibility to go and print this report out, and then she distributes the report. By relationship manager, and then she goes and hands over those reports to all those relationship managers. So the problem was that she's not able to print that report anymore, or she's not able to print that report in all the quarters, and the reason being that those reports are 700 page reports, and there is a limit on your printer to not print more than 500 pages per day. So the problem that came to us was the limit is too less. I need to be able to print my 700-page report. Can you please increase the limit on the number of pages that you need to that I could print in a day? That was the problem. So when I went and the problem was given to me to go and solve, and the easy response or the easy solution to that problem is, oh yeah, that's fine. I'll go and tweak the printer settings, and then you can now create. You can now print 700-page reports, and then we are happy, right? But that's not how we are built. We are always built to go and find the root cause of the problem, and also try and see whether we can bring some savings in that process. So when I went and asked that lady, I said, okay, take me through what you do with this report. And then she told me what I just explained to you. Um, and then I said, okay, so you give this report to the relationship managers. Relationship managers will check with their notes, and if everything is fine, then I said, what do you do then? She said, if everything is fine, we just want to check, and then we just shred the report, or we just put it in the bin or whatever. So I said, so I knew for a fact that as a employee of the bank, if you had credentials for the core system, you also automatically had access to a reporting tool that was also made available to the to the bank employees, and that also ANZ Bank. Okay, and what I found out during that conversation was that the business didn't know that. The business weren't aware that they already have access to the system because they go and make changes in there, but they did not know that the same credentials is also good enough to go and access an online reporting tool that was already in place. So I said, have you thought about not printing it at all? And based on what you're telling me, what you do with the report, that can very easily be done online without having to print at all. And so I said, and she was like, "Oh, okay. Well, how's that? Take me through that." And so I said, "You have an online reporting tool. All you just need to do is go into the reporting tool and generate that report by relationship managers. So you can download parts of the report in separate PDFs, or however you want, in Excel or whatever it is, and then you can distribute the relevant PDFs that you have exported to the individual relationship managers, and they can do everything online. And then once you're done with it, you just delete it." So she was intrigued. She said, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea." And then she said, "But we don't know how to use the system." So I said, "Look," and I didn't know either. But I said, "You know what? The reporting tool is actually not that hard, because it's just about being able to access the filters, and you put the right filters in, and then you generate a report, and you export it into PDF or an Excel file or whatever." Didn't sound very difficult to do. So when I went and talked to the system experts and they showed me how to do it, it was pretty simple. So I said, "You know what? I can do this for you instead of waiting for the training team to come and find a day for you. I just found out how to do it. So I can do a demonstration for you, and then I can prepare you a cheat sheet for you can stick it up to your up the desk, and then follow those instructions every quarter, and it'll be very easy for you." And it was about training one person, really, because she was the one who was generating the report and printing it out and whatnot. So the result of that whole conversation was that we didn't just increase the settings on the printer. We found an alternate solution which was a lot easier to do. Also, an alternate solution that saved heaps of money in terms of printing, not to mention the amount of trees we would have saved since that solution. Right? So it is never about just giving the business what they want, but it's about finding out what is the root cause of the problem and attacking that. And the solution that the people had in their mind, or the solution that the business had in their mind, was nowhere near the solution that was actually implemented. So that way, if you think about the problem that you need to solve, then solutions do come out of the box. So that was an example of how a BA, how I worked as a BA in one of the banks I spent some time in. Let's look at the next one. Go that extra mile. So this is a very interesting project I worked in. I worked in a bank called National Australia Bank, and we were going through a massive program where we were implementing lots of small improvements at the branch level. One of the improvements we talked about was to implement corporate Wi-Fi in the branches. So what that did was that when you have corporate Wi-Fi installed, then the bankers can use their laptop instead of a desktop that they currently have. And with a laptop, you can move around the bank, and you can, when a customer comes into your office, you could take them to whichever meeting room is available, and then you can use your laptop and plug it to your TV screen in the room and do what you have to do and show what you have to show. The limitation without that was that people had to the bankers were forced to use their desktops, which are sitting in the back office. And so what they ended up doing was they had a conversation, then they would take down notes, and then they would go back into the back office once the customer is gone, and then they'll make all the changes in the system. Now with the laptop and the corporate Wi-Fi, they could just do all those changes in the system in front of the customer, and they could have more conversations and have more time to have more conversations and sell more. So that was the idea. And bankers don't have time to adapt to new technology. The bankers don't have time to learn anything new, right? Because they've got targets to meet. They've got to work on getting X number of dollars in by the end of the month, and so on and so forth. So for them to switch from desktop to laptop was quite a hassle for them. So I called them up a week after we shipped those laptops, and I talked to the branch manager and to get some feedback as to how the laptop's working, how the corporate Wi-Fi is working, and all that. And a few of those branch managers said, "Yeah, I haven't had the time to do it because I'm so busy. I can't. I don't know. I don't have the time to do it." So what I mean by going that extra mile, and that wasn't my job. It clearly wasn't my job. But what I said was, you know what, I will do this. And all those banks were close to my house. So the next day, I told my office, this was pre-COVID, right? So I told my office that I won't be coming to the branch into work tomorrow. I went straight to the branches from my home, went from one branch to another in that area. Who did not have time to do this. I went and I picked up their laptops and I logged in for them, and I connected their corporate Wi-Fi. I opened up the systems on their laptop, and I showed them. I said, "See, this is where it is." So obviously the interface didn't change. It is just moving from a desktop to a laptop. But the fact that I went out of my way to go and do such a common thing for them, they really appreciated that. So they really appreciated the fact that I took time out of my project time, and I did something that was clearly not in my job description. Effectively did what service desk would do for them in a way. But sometimes as a BA, you've got to go that extra mile so that you see the people using your solution, and you can get some immediate feedback by sitting with them and talking to them and showing them how things are done. It really helped in that situation. So that's the second one. This is a very interesting thing, right? Why I've got a QR code over there is that I wrote an article about how business analysis and customer experience are two sides of the same coin. Feel free to whip up your mobile phones and scan that QR code for you to read that article later. Banks in Australia are big on customer experience because they do a lot of innovation in that regard. Some of the banks are probably years ahead of other banks in terms of customer experience, and they really put a lot of thought in ensuring that when a customer walks into their branch, they get their stuff done as soon as possible, and they get to leave without having to wait for a long time. So those are the kind of initiatives that lots of banks have implemented. So I worked in the same bank, National Australia Bank, and we were going through this whole program as to how we can optimize foot traffic into the branches. and make sure that any customer comes in, they get their questions answered, and then they go immediately. And there's lots of other initiatives we talked about. It was not just about people walking in. It was a whole revamp of the customer experience of all the customers interacting with the brand. So we made lots of changes on the iPad app. We made a lot of changes on the phone app. We made a lot of changes on the internet banking side. We also made a lot of changes to facilities at the branch for people to be able to walk in and do stuff at the branch for themselves as well. A range of initiatives were discussed. And so this is where I probably first got to work with the customer experience consultant, or a CX designer, so to speak. And that's where I really got to understand what a CX designer does, and how a CX designer and a BA is up there meant to work with each other. So inspired by what I learned in that project is how I wrote that article. So feel free to scan that and read it in your free time. So what a CX person does is what we colloquially call above the line. So they design the end-to-end customer experience when they interact with the brand, and that's above the line is where the CX consultant operates, and below the line is where the BA operates. And the job of a BA is to put processes in place in order to service that customer experience that we have sort of promised to our customers. And so I'll let you read that article for what I learned in that project. But having said that, what we also ended up doing was a lot of pre-analysis. A lot of our pre-analysis is what the BAs and the project, in fact, not just the BAs, the project did a lot of pre-analysis into each of those initiatives that we had thought about to optimize the customer experience, and they all went through a DVF assessment. Okay, now what's DVF? Anyone does not know what DVF is? Just put your virtual hand up, or if you do, that's great. And anyone's not heard of DVF? Sounds like everyone has. So which is good. So DVF was a term coined by IDEO, which is an online training company in America. So what that basically means is that every initiative or every project has to be assessed in terms of desirability, viability, and feasibility. And the trifecta of those three aspects is what we call the innovation sweet spot. What that means is that the product that's being developed is highly desired by the customers. It's also viable in terms of return on investment and so on and so forth, and also from a brand image point of view. And it's also feasible because it's already aligned to our architectural principles, or it's already aligned to there's less of a risk factor, and there's a manageable change that's involved with implementing this project, and so on and so forth. What this means and why this is important is CX people have a very good view of the desirability, whereas the business analyst has a very good view of the viability and the feasibility, right? Because the BAs go and talk to internal people and find out whether this solution is viable, whether this is going to give us a good return on investment, what is the risk involved with this, and so on and so forth. And we also understand feasibility because a lot of BAs do feasibility study and see what is the impact on change, what is the impact on brand, what is the impact on the architecture, what's the impact on what's the technical impact, and so on and so forth. So BAs understand the V and the F really well, and the customer experience consultants understand the desirability really well. So what this means is the CX consultant and the BAs are supposed to be working together in every project. Not in all companies do you get to work with a CX person, or a CX person gets to work with a BA. What that tells us as a BA is that we shouldn't just be looking at the viability and the feasibility. We need to extend our vision and think about the desirability as well. That means we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the customer and see whether this product is going to be desirable. So in some cases, you might have to go and interview some customers as well if your project does not have a CX professional that you have resourced for. What we then also did was with desirability, viability, and feasibility, there are various factors that you see on the right-hand side. You have customer coverage, what is an NPS uplift, and then what is the strategic alignment in terms of viability, what is the cost to implement, and so on and so forth. And we got everyone to come together and rate each initiative against each of those factors, and we put a formula together that would come up with a ranking for each of those initiatives. And that's what informed the project, what is going to be the most successful to what is the least successful. We put them in an order, and then we went through a follow-up project to implement those ideas in that order. And implementing the corporate Wi-Fi was one of those initiatives that went through this process of pre-analysis and assessment against the DVF method. Cool. I can see there are some messages in the chat which I'm not reading right now. We'll look at those chat. I don't know if there are any questions, but we will have some time for questions at the end of the session. Okay. So what is it that we also do? Scope control, right? It's a big part of what we do in companies as BAs, is we control the scope. All right. Why you see another QR code is I had written another article about how to handle ever-changing requirements and how to keep it under scope, and that's something that we are naturally tasked to do, right? With the time, cost, and scope triangle, the business, although the project manager is responsible for all the three, or is accountable for all the three, the BAs are particularly responsible for keeping the scope in check. What that means is that when customers come to you and ask you for an additional requirement after it's all been signed off, what are some strategies that you could put in place to ensure that we don't end up having any scope creep? So in all the banks I've worked in, that's a very common thing that I've done, is to challenge your customer, challenge your business, and ask them whether what they are asking for is that really required, is that really necessary, and there are some various techniques of how you can in a light-hearted way, how can you scare the business away? Okay, and what do I mean by that is by showing the business a true impact of what they're asking for. So what that means is that it could mean you have to do X amount of rework, you have to do X amount of extra work to implement this new requirement, which means additional development, additional testing, which means additional change work. It means additional. So with all that additional work that you need to do, that has a direct impact on the timelines and also has a direct impact on the budget. So it's the BA's job to assess how much of this extra effort is going to be needed, so that the project manager can work with you and translate that to dollars, and show the business the impact on the dollars, then, and show how much extra they'll have to be paying to get this additional requirement, and so on and so forth. This is something that I've done in every bank, in every project I've worked in, is to control scope, because it is my job to control the scope, right? So that's another thing that we do. I hope, James, I hope I'm on time. I'm not, because I tend to talk too much at times. So please do tell me if I'm getting close to finish time. Right. So that's the other one, and then so center of any project. As BAs, we are supposed to be the center of every project. Why is that? Is because, and I put up your hand or come on screen and tell me if you have something to share. How many times have you gone into some project as a BA and you've ended up doing a lot more than what a BA does? So you could have done a project manager, you could have stepped into a project manager role, you could have stepped into a Scrum Master role, you could have stepped into a change manager role. How many of you have done it? Jeff, you've done this. Do you want to come on camera if you don't mind? Tell us what did you end up doing more than what a BA does? Oh, you don't need to come on camera. You can just speak if you like.
I'm off mute. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Well, given that I've been a business analyst and worked in banking in Australia and predominantly institutional banking, I was just interested to hear what you had to say. So yeah, I mean, I've worked with, in effect, as project manager, as a change agent, as all sorts of. There's interesting. I saw a role recently which was an implementation manager or project implementation manager. It was like a hybrid of a whole series of things. So I looked at what the scope was, and it was like it's pretty much everything, every component of a project role. But predominantly, I've worked closely with, worked on change stuff, and also worked as project managers working on sort of iterative tactical solutions. I found it interesting about talking about scope too, because in my experience, scope, you're right, you've got to get scope nice and tight. And sometimes it's easy to confirm what's not in scope rather than what's in scope. So if you specify what's not in scope, that way at the end or during the project, someone says, well, why aren't we doing this? Well, you clearly point out, we're not doing this. Because otherwise, a lot of people assume, if you didn't mention it by name, so sometimes you need to be very specific about calling things that, no, we're not doing this, and then have the arguments up front about what you're doing. Does that make sense?
So it does. And in your experience, Jeff, what were the situations under which you had to step into other roles? Was it because the PM left the project halfway, or they did not have, they never had any budget?
No, the PM was probably, to be honest, it's all right, I've left the bank now. So, and that person's left. Yeah, no, it was suboptimal. I used the word suboptimal. So the project director asked me to step in because he wasn't doing his job. And like when it comes to a business analyst, my take on this is always about getting the job done, very achievement focused. And one of the things I thought, well, maybe we'd talk about is because I've also hired BAs in a previous life, is when I interview them, it's quite interesting. I always look for problem solving and critical thinking and problem solving to determine their adaptability to change. And so sometimes you give them a scenario or something and you ask them, like I've got a series of scenarios, you ask them what they do. It's more about the way they think about the problem rather than getting to the answer. But anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. I'll let everyone else jump in.
Oh, fantastic. Anyone else who wants to come off camera or come off mute and share their experience of when they had to do more than business analysis? James, do you have do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say that's the beauty of our role. I was typing that into the chat, but I'll just say it because it's a big long paragraph. Yeah, the fact that we can take on other roles and do a great job, like it's all about bringing that value. So I think if you do have that skill set to step into like a project manager role or a product owner role, like when I started my as a BA at the start of my career, I actually was transitioning or kind of handling both BA and the product owner role. Now, the product owner role was very kind of new and a lot of people didn't really understand what that meant. But I end up doing both of those roles together because my company didn't really want to hire a dedicated product owner. They didn't really see, oh, it's actually its own role in itself. And they thought because we're agile, or agile in inverted commas, that we don't need this full-time person to do this particular role. We can use the BA. So that's where mine kind of overlapped. But it was great because now I've been able to learn more about product ownership. I was able to get my certification and I can step into that role in the future.
It's interesting you say that. Interesting you say that, just to jump in. It's because Commonwealth Bank has currently changed their mechanism. They've gone the other way.
So they're basically now not hiring BAs; they're only hiring product owners. So they're getting rid of all their BAs, and they're getting rid of all their BAs, and you have to be a product owner now. So they don't seem to see the difference between the two. Sorry.
Yeah, right. You're right. And then on the flip side, you have ANZ Bank, who have completely renamed their business analysts, and they call them journey experts. So that it's basically telling them the BA should be looking at the customer journey aspect of it and fitting in your requirements, which is fine. But the reality is that the journey experts are the ones who are doing more of the agile admin work, whereas they still have a cohort of BAs working in ANZ Bank who are doing the traditional BA work of eliciting requirements and whatnot. So every bank is different. Some, like Jeff said, CBA is doing more product owners, whereas ANZ is saying that they're doing journey experts, but they're actually part PAs sort of thing. Krishna, you came off camera. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just an observation within my team. What I observed is, as we all know that BAs are, the skills set is versatile and they can jump into any kind of roles. And yes, absolutely, they started to do project management, product owner, scrum master. What I've observed is, which is interesting, is the BAs who jump into project management roles specifically, it's their interest, they can't sustain for long, right? Because one of the reasons is the planning and everything is absolute, they can do, but wrangling and chasing people or the stakeholders across, which is a critical part of a project manager, that BAs don't like. That getting the heat back, from the project manager, I have not seen them, they're doing that. I have many team members. Yes, they started, stepping into the project management role. Yep, at a certain point, yep, this is done. Let the PM take over, and they step back, because that's where they said, oh yeah, okay, you need to chase people to get certain things done, which is a little bit annoying. So I've seen that observation, but product owner is perfectly fine. They just run with it. Yeah, it's kind of, in bed, we get the business one. Yeah,
that's true. It's a very good observation, because I think intrinsically BAs, and it's not always true, but at least majority of the BAs that I have encountered are very, I wouldn't call them introverted, but they like to get stuff done. Right. And we're not always very good communicators. We like to, put our blinkers on and start to do requirements and all. Yes, you have to engage with people, you have to communicate well and all that. But then we like to, get stuff done. PMs on the other hand, I'm not saying that PMs don't want to get stuff done. They do want to get stuff done. But then the skill set for a PM is slightly different, because they have to go up and they have to manage expectations from the steering committee. They have to wrap up the messaging in a way that they understand, without having to without having to give too many details and freaking them out. And it's a different skill set. So I'm not saying you can't do both. Yes, you can. There are some BAs who are just brilliant at project management as well, but it just comes naturally to them. But then but the skill set is different. You're right. But why am I asking you all these questions? The reason why I'm asking these questions is to ask you a counter question. Why do you think everyone comes to a BA and not anyone else in the project to ask them to step up into a different role? Why can't they go to the testers and say, can you do project management? Why can't they go to the developers and say, can you do change management? All right.
I think the BAs closely work with the project managers. Good BAs work closely with good PMs, and the better the relationship, you're very much working collaboratively together. And that's very unique to the role, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And so in answering that question is what this slide is about, is because we are why are we the center of the project? Because your requirements are the center of the project. Your requirements is what's giving the project the direction that it needs. And because you understand the requirements so well, and you in extension, you understand the solution to meet those requirements so well, you can step into a change manager role to take the business, or to take the the stakeholders through the journey, because you've already probably established a relationship with them in the process of doing your requirements. So you take that relationship to the next level, and also hold their hand and take them across the line in terms of change management, because you know the solution so well, and because you know the requirements so well, you can work with the testers in helping them to come up with test cases to ensure that they actually meet the requirements. You obviously, you know, you've seen so many instances of people working as project managers and product owners as well, and an extension to project managers, you also find yourself working as a scrum master as well. So why am I saying all this? Is because a BA understands the requirements and the solution so well that he or she is in a great position to step into all these adjacent roles, because they're all directly related to the requirements and the solution. And why am I saying this in terms of the theme of today's topic? Is this is exactly what I've done in all these different banks that I've worked in. At NAB, when I joined as a BA for that customer experience project I talked about, and then when we graduated from that project of assessing all the different initiatives, and we started to implement all those initiatives one by one, we broke into various agile teams, and each agile team took one initiative and then they implemented, and then they picked up the next one, and so on and so forth. So we actually had multiple agile teams. And then that's when they looked at me and said, Arvind, can you be the Scrum Master? So I suddenly became the Scrum Master, and then I was Scrum Mastering 3 different teams. And then, as luck would have it, none of them knew how to do agile properly. So I then became an impromptu agile coach. So I would take them all through all the ceremonies myself, and then I ran all the sprint planning, and then I ran all the daily stand-ups. And I wanted to. This is not a matter of ceremonies per se, but it's a matter of pushing things at a faster pace, and that's what I did as a BA. I only know agility from experience. I'm not a certified Scrum Master, or I'm not a certified Agile practitioner of any sort, but I've worked in enough places to understand the underlying principle of Agile. And I use that to work as a Scrum Master. I've been asked on other projects, not on this project. I've been asked to go and rescue the project, and I quote, was because the business did not understand the solution, and the project lacked a change manager. So I stepped in as a change manager for that particular consulting gig, and I did what a change manager has to do to take them across the line. So I've done multiple roles, project managers. As I've lost count of how many times I've worked as a project manager. It's not even funny, and all that. So anyway, so this is another thing that a BA very naturally does, and everyone gravitates to a BA, asking that person to step up into roles, and all these adjacent roles. And so, all of us have done it. So, we just saw. What does that do for us? Why is that helpful for BAs? Is for us to develop our T-shaped skills. Anyone knows what T-shaped skills is about, other than what you already see on the screen? Right. So T-shaped skills is about having one area of depth, and where you have the ability to work across areas is what your T shape is about. So wherever I've gone, even if I've worked in a different role, I've used my core skills as a BA to perform the other role. Right. So, for example, and this is probably not a banking example I can give you here, but I worked for a utility company in Australia, and I went there. Kid you not, is not even a project role. It was actually an incident manager, change manager, major incident manager, and a problem manager. So these are all ITIL roles, right? They're all service delivery roles. And so I also stepped into an operational role to backfill for someone who had gone on leave. And I had to run their change management process. I ran their major incident management process, and so on and so forth. But how did I use my BA skills? Was when I walked into that place, the first thing I noticed there was that they do not have any process that they follow for their change management. Right? It was not documented anywhere. So I put on my BA hat, and that made me feel very fidgety that there was nothing documented. So in my short 6 or 7 weeks that I was there, that I had to backfill for someone else, I left with good documentation done about all those 3 processes that I was managing. So the person who came back to his role to take back the reins from me, looked at all those processes and said, "Whoa, this is fantastic. I've been wanting to do this." And so I got to do that. So I used my BA mindset. I used my BA skills for documentation and process mapping and all that. And I came up with a good end-to-end process for each of those 3 processes, each of those 3 service processes that I was handling. So you end up using a lot of your core skills of a BA to be able to do your adjacent roles as well. And the more you do, the more you throw yourself in there to be doing all these other roles and not stick to being called a BA, that actually expands your T-shaped skills. And that means that you could do much broader delivery roles and you have much better stories to tell your next employer in an interview, right? So this is something that I just put together in one of my articles, which I wanted to prove a point to say why BAs are supposed to be busy throughout the life cycle of a project. Lots of people, lots of companies have also noticed that they think a BA is useful only in the beginning of the project where we do the requirements, and then once the requirements are signed off, they don't really need us, so they repurpose those BAs to another project. And that's a big mistake, because a BA is not just responsible for doing the requirements, but a BA is also responsible for ensuring that everyone across the life cycle of the project understands the requirements in a consistent fashion. We are like the connecting thread all the way from the business till the testers and the release managers who are going to be releasing this feature to production. Right? Everyone needs to understand the same thing. If I could very easily write a document and then push it across the fence for the architect to catch it and read it, but for someone who's reading that, they're just reading some words on a page, which is open for misinterpretation. So the architect could be reading your requirements document and could be interpreting something totally different. And they could go and start designing a solution for a requirement that they thought was there, but it wasn't. But then the developers could pick up the requirements and the solution, and then they could interpret it in a third way, and they could go and start developing something else. So before you know it, by the time it started with one person and ended with something else, the business has got something totally different from what they told the BA. So it is our job as a BA to ensure that everyone understands the same way, and we work closely with every set of project teams to ensure that they're doing their job to meet the same requirements, and it's our job to validate whether the solution is meeting the requirements, whether the test cases are meeting the requirements, whether the design is meeting the requirements, and so on and so forth. So this is just a picture that I put together for one of my articles. And I thought it was a good way to explain to people how BA should be engaged from start to end in the project, and not only in the beginning of the project and then be repurposed for something else. So there you go. And then, yes, this is my last slide. So this is something that I'm quite passionate about. This particular concept of business analysis is what we do at the end of it all is that we build relationships. Okay, everything we do. I don't know how many of you are Babok certified. I don't know how many of you know what the Babok says about underlying competencies, right? But building relationships is a foundation for all those underlying competencies, right? Because when what we do in all this, we get outcomes, but then we look at some of those underlying competencies. We talk about ethics, we talk about personal accountability, trustworthiness, and organization, time management, adaptability. All these things are useless if you do not have a relationship with your business. Okay, your trustworthiness is never trusted if you do not have a relationship with the business. If the business don't have a relationship with you, they don't trust you, right? You intrinsically trust your family because you got a relationship with them. You intrinsically trust your friends because you got a relationship with them, because you know who they are. You know them very well, and that's the kind of relationship a BA is expected to establish with the business. So you automatically become trustworthy. You automatically become their advisor, and you, when you take accountability for your work, you add to that relationship. The relationship just becomes stronger and stronger when they see that you're taking responsibility for your work, you're taking accountability for your work. But at the end of it all that is good. Why? All that is useful only when you have a good relationship and you use those relationships and your underlying competencies to get outcomes, to get stuff done. Right? Does that make sense? I'm taking that as a yes. There you go, James. Thank you. Right. I think I've come to the end of my presentation, and if you don't mind, James, I'll quickly plug in some information about the BA conference that's actually happening right now in Australia. It's supposed to be the largest conference, the largest BA conference, and the largest flagship event for the IIBA Australia chapter. This whole week is the online tickets. This whole week is the online conference, and next week is an in-person conference. So if anyone from here is, I think a couple of you are from Australia, please don't miss this event. You can obviously you can whip up your phone and scan that QR code, and it'll take you to the Festival of Business Analysis website, where you can buy tickets if you like. People who are in Ireland, online tickets are still available. You can go on that QR code and buy your online tickets for this week. I know it's Tuesday, and you probably missed yesterday and today, but the beauty of the online program is that you get access to all those recordings for 6 months after the event. So even if you missed what you missed yesterday and today, you can still catch up on all that material for 6 months after this week. Okay. For the people who are living in Australia, please try and make it to the in-person day in your city, wherever you're from. That's about it. Okay. So on that note, I will stop here, and thank you for your time. And I've got you should have noticed by now that I'm a bit of a QR code junkie, so I love QR codes. So here's the QR code of my LinkedIn profile. So please, if you want to connect to me, you're more than free to, and I'll be more than happy to stay in touch and answer any questions if you have. So on that note, back to you, James.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Arvind. That was a fantastic presentation, and thanks so much for taking the time. I can definitely agree with stakeholder relationships. Like, that's so important as BAs. So that point touched home with me. We do have time for some Q&A. If anyone has any questions, you can still drop them into either the chat or the Q&A tab. I do see 2 questions in the chat. The first one is around digital transformation. So have you identified a complete shift to digital transformation projects?
Yes, I have. But I would, I don't know if this is the trend in Ireland too, but in Australia, I've seen lots of job opportunities for a digital BA. Okay. Does it really exist? Is there something called a digital BA? It's just a BA working on digital projects, isn't it? You know, it's the same like technical BA. There's no such thing as technical BA. It's just a BA working on technology projects or technical projects, or implementing some backend thing. So yes, why I'm using that as an answer is because I've started to see lots of digital BA roles in the job market, which is only telling me that lots of companies are going digital, and they're looking for BAs who have worked in digital projects to come and help them in those digital transformation projects. So it's a short answer, yes.
I think it's the same which brings me to my next question. The topic of AI. we're seeing a lot of AI business analyst roles, which I have my own opinions on. I won't express them here. But Jeffrey had a question regarding AI, and I suppose, how does this impact the BA practice or what we do as BAs?
I will not tell you that BAs are going to be replaced by AI. That is a total myth. Okay, I'll tell you why. Because AI can really help BAs do their job better. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Let's take an example, right? Let's imagine a situation where you're working in a company. The company is implementing Salesforce. I'm just making it up, all right? Salesforce. You have not worked a single day in Salesforce, but you are the BA on that Salesforce implementation project. What would you do? Okay, you need to understand what what an application like Salesforce can even do for you to be able to elicit requirements from the business about what they want from a CRM system. If you don't know anything about Salesforce, the business is going to know even lesser. So they're going to look up to you to tell them what kind of requirements or what kind of features or functionalities they could get from an application like Salesforce. Now, you don't know anything about Salesforce. You've not worked a single day with Salesforce. You've never seen Salesforce with your eyes. What would you do? All right. This is where AI can really help you. All you can do is just go to AI and say, I'm working for X company, or if you don't want to reveal the name of the company on AI, you could say I'm working in a particular industry. Let's say banking. So I'm working in the banking industry. We want to implement Salesforce for the banking industry, or let's say institutional banking, to be a bit more precise. So for institutional banking, what are the kind of requirements categories that I should think about for implementing Salesforce? And trust me, AI gives you a fantastic answer. All right, and then use that as an anchor for your workshops. Use that as an anchor for your requirements elicitation exercise. So if AI comes back and says you need to think about this, this, and this, and this, straight away you've got 4 workshops that you need to organize. Each workshop talks about one functionality that AI has come back with, and then you can ask AI for more help to say what should be an agenda for a workshop that's going to talk about that functionality. Who are the most likely stakeholder groups that I might want to involve in that workshop? And it'll give you a generic answer. Obviously, you've got to go and think about how you can customize that for your company, and then that will help you plan for your workshops, right? So AI can be used in a lot of ways in a very good in a very productive way. In my previous company, I worked in a superannuation company. It's called UniSuper, and we actually implemented AI as a way of working for us. Okay, so when we did all these workshops and then we had post-it notes all over the place, we would just take a photograph of that whole board or whatnot, and then we'll feed it to AI and say, and we had a protected AI environment where we could freely share company information because it was going to stay within Azure, and and that Azure was in a very controlled environment, so it wasn't going out to the market. So we would just upload that photo and say, read all the post-it notes and come up and convert those post-it notes into requirements in a user story format. And it did a fairly good job. What I would warn you about AI is, do not take what AI gives you as gospel. You will have to do your own research, and you have to double check what AI does, because sometimes AI can start to hallucinate. AI can actually, if you don't review what AI gives you with a fine-tooth comb, you could look like an idiot very soon. Right? You could be doing something. AI could have made up some absolute nonsense, and you will take it to the workshop and just look really bad. So these are the kind of things that AI could really help. So when once it's done the requirements, or it's done a draft of the requirements, you could just simply go back to AI and say, hey, can you write acceptance criteria for each of these requirements? It comes back with a very good starting point for you to build on. And then you can review all those acceptance criteria and say, yeah, that makes sense. That does not make sense. Remove it. Maybe change the wordings here and there. So to do that is a lot faster than having to write everything by hand. So AI can really help in fastening the process and making your BA work more productive and actually really sharpening the edges around some of your work, right? Lots of BAs don't have English as their first language. Take me for example. I come from India, but I speak fairly good English. But I come from India where English is not my first language. So when it comes to communicating or when it comes to putting an email together for your business stakeholders, for example, I really use AI. I still use AI for that. I draft an email and put it on AI and say, can you sharpen this letter for me? Can you sharpen this email for me? It comes back with a fantastic response, a very professional response. Of course, read it again, make sure it still makes sense, and then send it out. So that's also a very nice communication tool. It can really help you in more ways than you can think. I hope I've answered the question, but there are so many more ways, but I'm sure you get the idea.
Yeah, I guess the question came from me. I just wanted to thank you for that. I think that what you're saying makes perfect sense, and you need to validate the information. I can give an example where I was putting together something, and I came together with a list, and you're right, it gives you those guardrails, and it came up with 10 items. I thought, yeah, I need to think about this. And then I thought of another one, and I gave it to AI, and I said, well, what about this one? And AI said, yeah, that's a good idea. Add that one in as well. So you can't.
Well, what AI is actually doing is actually learning from your feedback.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, we could. I never thought about it like that. We can put that in, so it's not going to give you 100%, right?
No, it's not. It's not. I'll share a funny anecdote if you have time, James. When AI was new and everyone was testing out AI, I did something very very different. I went to AI and I put a link to a random job ad, and I gave AI a link to my LinkedIn profile, and I said, look at my LinkedIn profile, look at this job ad, write me a cover letter if I had to apply for this role. I wasn't applying for the role, but if I had to apply for this role, write me a covering letter by comparing the job ad to my LinkedIn profile. And this was in its very early stages, right? So it came up with a fairly well-written cover letter. And then when I started to read what it had done, somewhere in the middle of the cover letter, it said, I am an expert in Python and React. And that's probably one of the things that the job ad I was asking for. And I don't know where it got it from. So it started to make up nonsense. And I have no mention of Python and React in my LinkedIn profile. So it just made that nonsense up. And I looked at that and said, where do you get that from? And then in my head, I was thinking the only truth about those words put together in one sentence in my profile is that I would react if I saw a Python. But that's about it. But I had nothing else, and I don't know where it came up with that thing. So that's why I say whatever AI gives you, double check and make sure that it doesn't make you look like a fool. Anyway, back to you, James. Any more questions?
I don't see any more questions in the chat. I know we have run over, but if anyone needs to drop, thanks so much for joining. Arvind, if you're happy to stay, if anyone does have any other question, we can continue. If anyone would like to come off mute or turn on their video to ask a question to Arvind, please feel free to do so.
I'll stop sharing so you. There you go.
Yeah, I think the AI topic, like we could spend hours talking about it. I think the validation is the most important thing, because you can't trust what that AI is giving you as an output, because that's just training on data. Like, it's a model that's being fed data, and if whatever data that is, that's what it's basically giving you answers based on. But I think it is a good way that BAs can ask it, prompt it in a way to give the right information back, and then to use that within their workshop to validate it in a validate it with your stakeholders, but in a way that doesn't make you look like, oh, I went to this AI tool and this is like the output that I got. You're kind of feeding it into, oh, have we thought about this particular category, or have we thought about this scenario, and do it that way. So then you're still leveraging your AI, your BA skills, but you're also validating what the AI has given you. And there's loads of different types of AI that we can use as well. I guess Gen AI is just one of them. But yeah, we could have a whole presentation on just AI.
Yeah, I know it's interesting because I know it's the hot topic of the month, and in the last 6 to 12 months, the banks are picking it up and buying the licenses now, like thousands and thousands. It went up to 300, and now it's going up to thousands. But there's just this thought that like prompt engineers, or prompting is really important. You feed it the right information. So I think the better the prompt, the better the information you get. So I think you've also got to be learning that skill. I think that's going to be a core component as well, the prompt component, because if you don't ask it the question in the manner it's expecting with the information it gets, it makes, like Arvind said, it makes a lot of assumptions. Like, it's funny how he said that. I can see it doing that because it's read something and it would just assume, based on some other information, that if you do this, you probably do that. And that's the bit where people are going to get caught out. It's going to make a lot of assumptions on what people can do, and they're going to get caught out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and that's so important, because even as like junior or aspiring BAs, like I've seen some LinkedIn posts and they're like, oh, I'll just go to ChatGPT and I'll get all my requirements and I'll document it and I'll give it to the developers and I'm done. And that's not what we do as BAs. So that's where you still need to use your core BA skills to make sure that you're thinking, like analytical thinking, problem solving, that you're doing that collaboration with your stakeholders, that you're not just doing this handover. We never do handover requirements, right? Even when we get something from a stakeholder, we don't say, oh yeah, that's a requirement. We get some information and we break it down, we analyze it, and then we say, okay, is it actually a need? Do we actually need this? Does it solve a problem? Is it valuable? Those kind of things. But if you don't have that thinking or that mindset, then you're going to fall behind, even by using an AI tool. So I think it's really important to see how we can leverage these tools as a BA with our skill set.
Yeah, I mean, there's no replace. It doesn't have human judgment, empathy. It doesn't have gut instinct. There's a whole lot of human components which it'll never have, like which it won't have. But it's interesting to me that it's become the flavor of the month, not the month, the last 6, 12 months. It's become, it's become really big, and people go, oh, what AI tool do you use? Or, what AI do you use? What it is good, I know it, where I've got a colleague who's using Microsoft Copilot, and it sucks up all this information into PDF form and Confluence pages, thousands and thousands, and gives him like bullet points, something that someone couldn't do, and it can do it in like 10 or 20 minutes. Putting together disparate sources of information, and from Confluence pages and from PDFs in SharePoint, and sucks it all up and does it. A BA could never do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It wouldn't even be able to do that, because it wouldn't be able to find and gather all the information. That's the amazing thing that I think it do. It's a consolidation of data information from disparate sources, which gives you a bullet point. You know what I mean? That's the thing I like about it anyway.
Totally. Shanky's got something to say. Sorry, Gustavo.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Arvind, for your great presentation. And I wanted to join the discussion because I've seen it, how not only VAs, but in many companies, they use AI, like Geoffrey says, for example, to help you with the tasks that are repeatedly made and automatically. That's one of the other ways that you can use AI, for example, to answer similar emails. So the AI can write a template of the response of the email, and of course, as James mentioned it, you have to know and have knowledge and see if that response is accurate and it has sense and it's not making it up and saying things that are not accurate, as are being mentioned, that can hallucinate and make things up.
True.
But it's a really powerful tool.
Yeah,
it totally is. But it's still learning, right? AI. I look at AI like how the world looked at internet 20, 30 years ago. Everyone thought all the jobs are going to be replaced when the internet came, and people are thinking the same about AI. But then the truth is that you need people, because these are all machines that are learning.
And not the
Shanky,
same. Yeah,
Sorry,
and
go on, Gustavo.
they don't answer the same response. If you ask the same question to different technologies, let's say Gemini or ChatGPT, they don't answer you exactly the same. So as you say, they are still learning, and they have different levels of learning, and different and also
Absolutely
different
true.
information.
Absolutely true.
It's
I think we've lost. Shanky.
I'm still here.
Oh yeah, hi
thanks,
Shanky. How are
Arvind.
you?
Thanks, Arvind, for the wonderful presentation. My question is
No problem.
around the quality assurance of the reports or the output from AI. Does it fall under, like, who's more responsible for that? Is it going to be a BA who's more responsible to that, or is it going to be a QA who's more responsible to that? Because considering
it depends on what
sorry,
you're using AI for, isn't it? If you're using AI for doing your requirements, then you're responsible for it. If the testers are using AI for doing test cases, then they're responsible for it, right? Whoever is using AI to do their job, it's their responsibility to make sure that they don't, because it's ultimately the accountability for that artifact lies with the respective groups.
And considering the example of Deloitte and the Australian government, how things have fallen apart in the last month, who do you think is going to be more responsible on that particular item? On that
Look, it depends, because
Deloitte's made a mistake. They didn't read the details, and it made up a whole lot of information. Deloitte's are accountable, and the government's going to go back to Deloitte's and say, if you're going to use AI to write these documents, I don't know if anybody else knows about this as well. They put a whole section in there which was completely wrong, but you've got to validate everything. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So yeah, like I said, comes down to if you're using, who is using AI for producing that artifact, that person becomes responsible.
Thanks,
so it comes down to the company whether they've got a policy around usage of AI. And if they have a policy, then they should have a way to implement that policy and ensure that everyone double checks, triple checks what they're producing from AI. If all that becomes part of policy, then people will be more mindful and watchful of what AI gives them back.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good lesson. It's a good lesson for Deloitte's.
That's true. And the rest of the world. So anyway, I'll have to drop off. I've got to go to a board meeting now with IIBA Australia. So thank you all for making your time to coming to this event. I hope you got something out of it. And like I said, I'm very easily found on LinkedIn, so I'll be more than happy to interact on LinkedIn as well and have a good conversation.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
It was a great presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks so much for joining, everyone. And thanks, Arvind, for joining all the way from Australia.
No worries. Thank you very much.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.